Yeah. We rising above, let me tell you how it's done. Above average black men, shining like the sun. With Chris Sr., Chris Jr., Devin on the beat, we're telling stories from the heart. Feel the pulse and the heat, yo! Step into the room, we bringing that vibe, highlighting kings and queens who thrive and survive. From the corner of the block, making dreams come true. We elevate the voices, yes, you know how we do. Chris Sia got the wisdom, laying down the facts. Chris Jr. with the passion, pushing us to relax. Devin brings the fire, always keeping it fresh. Together we're a force, rising up from the rest.
Above average black men, we breaking the mold. Sharing love, sharing stories, watch the truth unfold. Championing success in every single way. We uplift the community, come join us today.
Welcome to another episode of Above Average Black Men. Yours truly is Chris Pender Sr. And my other son just happened to walk in right on cue. Didn't know if he was going to make it tonight. So now I got to make sure we both get into the film tonight. And we have a special guest tonight. Remember, Evans, he was one of the first shows we did over at, we were in the studio.
Hello.
Hello, how you been? So
I've been good.
If I can get the camera back up, we'll all be good. But anyway, so go ahead and do your thing, man, that you do at the beginning, man.
Well, first, definitely want to say like, follow, subscribe, share, comment. And we're here to empower, inspire, and uplift the community. Happy to have you guys here with us. How you feeling, Danny? Feeling good?
Hot, man. Hot. Too hot. So Chris is not with us tonight because Chris is pursuing his comedy career.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was at Ilium last night. We all went down. He actually did it. He did a fantastic job. You know, so he's in his comedy mode now, man. So we'll.
I love that. I did manage to see a couple of his clips on Instagram.
Chris, but he's in this thing now where Philly's Funnies. Yeah. So I'm giving him a free plug here. He's in Philly's Funnies. So last night was round one, the first stage of round one. So he actually won round one. He keeps 3 of them. Nice. He first. So he did well. He did well, and he had a lot of support, which was pretty cool. We won't get into that. He had we were there, of course. He had some college teammates. He had some child friends. So it was a good time. So I'm gonna let you. I think the next round is September the 2nd. They weeknights though. Okay. Yeah, but I'll definitely let you know, man, because people getting the light.
Okay.
On the week, so the weeknights and stuff. But today's topic is going to be interesting. We're going to be talking about when being you is not enough. Being you is not enough. So we're going to let our very special guest give our clinical foundation, and then we're going to get into this. So when you hear that, what do you think?
When I hear that when being you is not enough, I hear insecurity. I hear low self-esteem. I hear self-doubt. I hear a little bit of imposter syndrome. So I hear a whole bunch of things, and I think just the sentiment of not being enough, it's always important to kind of talk to the people to see like in what context they're not feeling enough. So my mind goes all over the place with it, but I guess to hone in on it, it would take for that conversation to happen.
Now I gotta put my human services hat on. You said a lot of stuff there. So you did, and it's kind of funny because I agree with you to a certain extent, but understanding dealing with so many people, so many different populations, I could see where some of that may be offensive. Like especially when you said an imposter. So let's unpack that.
Well, I wouldn't say that to the person, right? I'm saying that to you guys.
I know, but even somebody listening will hear that and be like,
mm-hmm.
So can you just break it down for us so you can explain exactly what that means? I know you can say it to a client, but yeah.
Yeah, no. I think that when a person says, I feel like I'm not enough, it can be very complex. So we would need to kind of break that down. What does that mean, not being enough? Is it that I don't feel like I'm enough on the job? Is it that I don't feel like I'm enough in the family, right? Like I think about like people who are the middle children and they feel like nobody ever sees me. And you know what I mean? I think about people in their marriages, right? Feeling like I'm lacking in an area or I'm not good enough for my husband, or even a person who's dating that may say, oh, I don't think I'm good enough for him or, you know, or her. And so again, I think that it's like a loaded sentence, you know, because it can take on so many different forms. But for the sake of answering the question that you asked me initially, that's why I said, you know, these are the things that I would hear. These are the things that I would kind of, you know, kind of channel or funnel through.
So, because you know, this is not a an age restricted thing.
Yes.
Even when I'm talking about middle school kids. Kind of, you know, I hear middle school kids say it, high school kids say it. You know, it is really common. I think I hear more from adult men now. You know, especially
Mhm.
married men, because they feel like, you know, they always have to be Superman. We talked about this before we came on.
Yes.
How to get the turn of the Clark Kent. You know, especially if there's a change in finances or a change in some structure in a marriage that you know she's been accustomed to. And there's nothing the lady is doing. I mean, let me make this abundantly clear. I don't think there's anything that the wife is doing. I think a lot of it's self-imposed. That's why I said I agree with unpack this. But they do feel like all of a sudden I'm an addict because maybe I can't take the big vacation I should take. You know, gas is $5 a gallon now, so I can't do, you know, cruising all over the place, man. And my
Mhm.
money just got cut, or I just got laid off, or you know, I got a 2% raise, and you know, the economy went up 5%. So it's just so many dynamics that, and I'll start with men that men go through. And some of it is, one of the leading ones I hear is men who don't feel like they're getting enough affection, and they feel like what they're putting out is not coming back. And
Mhm.
this is because most men see that as rejection.
Mhm. So I do agree with you as far as it being self-imposed, right? Because we can look at that from both sides. I think that when those types of changes happen, like the list that you gave, when those types of changes occur or happens, I think that especially for men, because society is already hard on men, right? And then to come home and it to be just as hard, I think sometimes men have to allow their partners to step in or to step up,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think that so many times because being a man's man doesn't afford the opportunity for that, or being a man who has never had someone to kind of step in and fill the gaps, right? Then, yes, I would feel inadequate because I don't even know how to navigate this space. I don't want to be viewed a certain way. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to be viewed a certain way. I don't want to uh allow myself to be vulnerable, right? If I allow you to pick up, or you're now the breadwinner when I was always the breadwinner, now what does that mean for me and what other people might think, when a lot of times it's really not even, like you said, it's self-imposed. So it's not about what other people may think, because if we're a unit, then we both know, going back to building, right? We talked about building. How can we build anything if it's each man is on an island, right? Like, no, we're on this island together and we're going to build this pathway to get out of here, or to get to the next thing, or to glamorize what we already have. But I think it really has a lot to do with allowing yourself to be vulnerable when you're in certain relationships. And so, because no matter how much somebody tells you that you're enough, if you don't believe it, you'll never feel like you're enough.
Hence my book, You More Than Enough. See, that's
Free
release the plug.
plug.
Happy
I
to
like
plug
that.
it. Should have worn a shirt. I wasn't even thinking. But anyway, but there's three things. One, because I know early in my marriage, you were the same way. She was making more money. Now I'm a competitive dude. That's just me. You know, I'm enjoy the situation. I'm not losing. I'm not
Mhm.
losing. And
Mhm.
not that I looked at it as losing, but I was like, you. So I just went out and made more money. That to me, that was my response. I'm not gonna sit here and go back. I'm gonna make more money. Whatever I gotta do is go back to school. If I got, I'm gonna make more money. So that was my response. But I do know guys who feel like, you know, less of a man. Um,
Mhm.
they don't feel like is it's funny because it was a partnership when they were making more money. It was a partnership, when I guess you could say he felt they won't admit it, but to me, they felt a little power because they were making more money. They had more confidence. And then when they shifted, I think the confidence kind of shifted. Because now it was like maybe, and I'm just speculating, maybe you and I are married in this relationship. I make more money and I'm asking you questions, you give me your opinion. Now all of a sudden you make more money. Am I hearing your opinion or am I hearing you saying what we're gonna do? Because you make more money. I'm just telling you what she's
yeah.
But I'm just saying these are things that when you're talking to people that come out in the conversation. And because I'm not there, I don't know what the intent behind it is. I don't know. To me, that's a problem if all of a sudden that happens. If somebody starts making more money, they start whipping the chicken like they're in charge. But those are the things that men struggle with. They struggle with because I think they do associate the power with the economics. I think part of it is, and this is my second point, we never discuss finances before we get married. When I sit down and talk to there's three things that they never talk about. They never talk about the definition of love. You got two people getting married, and they got these two jacked up definitions of love. One is saying it's a death do us part, and one is saying until you get on my nerves. One already got the no fault divorce thing in the back pocket. Before going them out. The other one, so I think they don't talk about finances. They never sit down and say, okay, how are we going to handle our finances? And to me, the big one is they don't talk about family. So they bring all this junk into their relationships that they don't even know they have.
Yeah. And I think everything that you listed, it just falls back to communication, right? But it also, keep going back to not feeling like you're enough, if and Devin probably knows this, so that way we could bring him into the conversation. That song by LMA, what is it, 100? I think that's the title of the song, where she's talking about like how things are split, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be 50-50. It could be 80-20. It could be 70-30. But being okay in who you are to say, you know what, yeah, that is what it is. Like my wife we're doing 70-30 right now because I am in school, or I'm working on this next thing to take my business to the next level. And with the right person, right, you're able to accomplish that without all of the stress and the chaos and and so I wanted to ask Devin. Now I know y'all are supposed to be asking the questions, but what do you think, especially like being a young man, like really just getting out into the world, as far as how you're viewing going into relationships?
Well, he's serious now, so he's in a different place. So we got
Okay. All right.
He's seen a little chest poke out. I'm not just getting out the world.
Okay. It's official. But like, do you agree with that mindset of like what she kind of talks about in the song?
The mindset of, are we just talking about splitting things like you said, 80-20?
Because that would go into like, feeling less than, or not feeling like you're enough, or you're not doing enough as a man, because this is coming from a woman saying, listen, baby, I got you. Like, if this is what it is for now, like, we can work through this. And your dad and I talked about like building things. And I think that goes back to the premise of how we build. And sometimes it is a little unbalanced, but it doesn't mean that we have to be at each other, or that I have to walk in the spirit or the mindset of lack. And so, I just wanted to hear your opinion.
So for me, she probably is watching. For me though, I'm like completely comfortable with it. Like, I've been blessed enough to find someone that if tough times like that were to happen, that she would have my back. That look, I do got things right now, and she knows it will be vice versa. So I actually have no problem with that. I feel like most people my age and a little younger probably wouldn't have an issue with that. And I mean, that may be a thing of a generation that may be a little older than me, or that might have been a status quo where the man always had to be in charge, always had to make the most money, and if they pretty much fell down, the whole ship sank.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I burst everybody's bubble. The only time marriage is 50-50 is when you ask and she says yes. And I'm going to tell you why. At any time, in any successful relationship, somebody's giving you. I don't care how you slice it, how you dice it. I want to meet the people who ain't giving the same amount every day. You don't, because, for instance, for me to build my business, my wife had to pick up the slack. She was
Yes.
making sure the homework was done. She was making stuff. She's working a full-time job. I was talking to somebody about that today. I was having a conversation with a young lady, the same conversation, because somebody was telling her how a middle school student, women can't run stuff. And I said, let me tell you something. My wife was pregnant, running a house, working a full-time job, making sure I wasn't an idiot.
Yes.
So it's not 50-50. There was times when she picked up the slack so I could do the things I do to make money. And then there's times when, when I remember she was working every Saturday, then I had to kind of pick up the slack. Like, got up Saturday morning, took them to baseball, whatever they went to, got to make sure they ate, did the things. So I think that's part of the problem, because people going with this 50-50 thing, and it's not real. It's not, because to me, when you start saying it, now you start keeping score. Now I'm measuring.
Yeah.
Ebony did 4 things and I did 6 things. So no, and I think it becomes an issue. For instance, I was talking to somebody in a group, and she says, so we're talking. So she says, she wants to get a new car. So I said, well, let's look at your financial situation. So he says, well, suppose your wife wants a new car. I said, she does want a new car. Well, why don't she get one? I said, because it don't work like that in my house. I said, the way we do things in my house, we discuss purchase over X dollar amount, whatever it is. She said, well, she don't need permission. I didn't say permission. I said, we have a healthy conversation around what we do not. And then if I disagree, I have to explain why I disagree. And I tell you why I disagree. We want a new car. We don't need a new car. We have 2 perfectly fine. And I tease her, like, I go out washing waxes. You got a new car. She don't need that. Yeah. But that. So I was trying to explain to her need and desire. And I said, we're thinking long term, when we retire, how much, that we're always thinking about these different things. But in her mindset, well, she don't need permission. That's all she heard. That's all she heard was, and then somebody else started chiming in. Well, don't she have her own money? And I said, no. I said, we need our own money. I said, we're married. I said, we have a joint account. She manages a joint account. But it's not, it goes to the same place. We share. We share in everything. But who earns it? So, and these are not young people. I'm not talking about, Yeah, so that's the mentality that we have now, and it kind of goes back to why people may feel like they're not giving enough, or not enough, because if they're lacking one of, Devin said it. I'm used to bringing this to the table, or I've been raised to think that.
Yes,
I'm in this relationship, but I also think the psychological part of it is, and this is where you can, prove me wrong again. I think a lot of it is because we got a lot of trauma that we haven't dealt with. And trauma's not always about murder and mayhem. We can be traumatized by things we've seen growing up. Watch too much TV, too many reality shows, and I think that adds to it. So I guess my question would be, how would you begin to work with somebody like that? Let's do some case scenarios. We've been beating up men long enough. Let's move over to the female side. So you got a female professional. She's knocking out the box. She is. But all of a sudden she comes home. She's not, because this is I hear issues about this. She's a boss at work. She sees him at work, everything's getting done, man. It's rolling. Then she comes home to her husband and her lovely children. And all of a sudden she just doesn't feel the same. Doesn't feel like the same person, because my husband's looking at TV when I'm trying to talk to him. I got to tell the kids 2 or 3 times to get stuff done. It's like I don't have the same power, so I'm living 2 different lives. And at home, because I'm not accomplishing and having the same success at work, I don't feel like I'm enough. So what do you say there?
What do I say to that? I think it's easier to I'm gonna use the word flex, or to manage, to boss up at work, because people are getting paid to do a thing, right? When you come home, your kids aren't getting paid to do a thing.
They eating, they sleeping, they got electricity.
Well, we know that, but they don't look at that transactional thing, right? They're looking at it like, why did I take this trash out? Ain't nobody paying me to take the trash out. Why do I have to sweep the floor? Nobody's paying me to sweep the floor. And I'm a household. I don't believe in allowance. I do not do allowance, because my thing is, I'm not going to pay you to do something that you should naturally be doing. If I am working every day and I'm paying all the bills and I'm making sure, like you said, you have food and a roof over your head and the lights are on, right? The least you can do is pick up the broom or get the mop or do the dishes, right? And so I think that too also, like, when we think about hyper independent women, um that's rooted in trauma, right? I am going to do all things because I don't ever want to feel disappointed. I can overachieve at work, and I can be extremely organized in the workplace. And then when I come home, I'm depleted. So I don't have the energy to argue with my man. I don't have the energy to constantly remind the kids, or I'm lashing out all the time. Right. And so I think if I were working with a woman who was kind of struggling in those two worlds, it would be to focus on self care. It would be to focus on like natural consequences at home, right? Like, not that we have to be argumentative, because I do believe that pressure busts pipes. So I'm like, you don't need to go home screaming and hooping and hollering, right? Because you just worked the full day. I think it goes back to the communication style, the expectations that you have for the people that live in your house, and making sure that you're sitting everybody down to communicate those things, right? Because if I raise kids in a household where there are no expectations, then naturally those little people grow up and they become tweens and teens and, young adults, right? Why do I have to do it now when I never had to do it before? And so you have to help them unlearn a thing, right? Naturally, because we're talking about women and moms, naturally moms just pick up the slack and they do it, and they do all things, right? It's because it's faster.
It used to be naturally. It used to be naturally.
It used to be, yeah. But the mental load is real, right? That invisible load that women carry. Like, you're thinking for everybody in your household, right? Exhausting. You're scheduling all of the appointments most times.
Except this house, but anyway.
But I'm just saying. So thinking about the invisible load. So I think it has a lot to do with communication styles. It has to do with mindset and how we're viewing a thing, right? Like, because if I'm viewing it as something negative, it's going to continue to be something negative, versus saying, I need you guys to chip in and to help me. Like, don't wait until I get sick to help me, you know. And I think just having those raw conversations, but it would be a lot of helping the woman to communicate more effectively, to model certain things for the kids, right? Like, so if I come home and the chores aren't done, we're not going out to eat. If I come home and the chores aren't done, you can't go hang out with your friend, And so it doesn't have to turn into any big debacle or debate, but if this, then this. And I think we have to just really position ourselves to model certain things.
But you're talking about. Well, first I want to get your opinion. I know you're young and you're new to the game, but
I'm very very fresh. I feel luckily, my girlfriend does. She is in therapy, so she doesn't hesitate to let me know if something is going on or something's happening. She needs help with something, and I think that's kind of the key, is to have the conversation. You never know until the person speaks up and they say something. Even when it comes, like you mentioned, the whole self-care day, if she starts to feel overwhelmed with things and I'm not picking up my slack, just really encouraging her to have that moment for herself, set aside every day, a month, just to.
you.
Yeah, I pick up something.
He has some great examples.
Just to herself, where she can go to the spa or do some things like go thrifting and stuff like that. So it definitely helps.
And I do agree with that, Devin. And I'm so proud of you that you pick up on that and you pay attention, right? Because so many times when we think about emotional intelligence, everybody has like tunnel vision and they only think about what I have to do for myself, right? And so there's no cross sectionality, I guess is the word, but there's no like thinking outside of the lane that you're in when it comes to the other people. It's only about what I need, right? And so it's easy to feel like you're not enough, or it's easy to feel like you're unseen if everybody is watching you run on this hamster wheel and nobody says, let me stop that, you need to get off. or you need to sit down, or why don't you go take a nap, or hey babe, I scheduled a spa day for you, right? But I also think it's just as important to be able to receive that when someone says it or when someone acknowledges it. So I'm really proud of you for being able to pick up on that. And Chris, you could pat yourself on the back too, because clearly, you know, but because that's so huge. But I will say, when we think about like just different generations, right? So even if you go back to like your grandfather, he was a certain type of man, your dad, a certain type of man. You are now a different type of man, right? And so while they pass some things down, each generation also passes down a little bit of something that could make it a little more doable. You know what I mean? So that we're not feeling like we have to have these capes on all the time, so that we can create safe spaces in our households, because we acknowledge that the world is already hard enough. And so I think that's the other important thing too, like understanding that from generation to generation, that people do look at things differently.
But I also think we have to acknowledge that sometimes spouses, partners, and other people contribute to people feeling that. Well,
Yeah.
it's
Hmm.
not always somebody's psychological problem or somebody the way they see themselves. There's
Hmm.
times when guys have said stuff to me, that their spouse have said to them. That's interesting. That's quite interesting.
But I
And
think we also have to teach people, right? Like what's going to work and what's not. Like you don't get the opportunity to verbally abuse me and think that I have to keep showing up, right? Because at a certain point we have to draw the line, because people will say things and people will continue to act away. And I think even when we look at the different generations, like Devin's generation, they're getting to a point where it's like, okay, so you had trauma. Okay, we all go through something. Go to therapy, go talk to somebody, right? But you don't, just because you had a certain experience, it doesn't mean that you get to treat me a certain kind of way.
but there's three rules that I've come to understand and help me work better with my clients regards to these. The first thing is that most people live in a house without mirrors. What I mean is they never see what's wrong with them. They
Yeah.
never ever do. We were just talking about somebody. We were just talking about somebody earlier. Who the same way. They've been like this forever. So they
Mhm.
don't see the shortcomings. They don't see, you know, they don't. I mean, the second thing is most people don't realize they are a real, true product of their environment.
Mhm.
The way you're raised, unless something subconsciously happens, and you say, "I'm going to make it," we talked about too, and after the changes, they don't see the need to change because that's their norm. That's their norm. You're wrong. You're out. So you bring this into
Mhm.
and then I
Yeah.
think the third thing is my wife and I debate this all the time. I think 85% of people in the world are selfish. That's just me. I think 85, they get on me too, but I see my number is high. I just truly believe now 85% of people in this world are selfish. So there's always me. I, it's never okay. Like my dad told me this, and then he said, Chris, there's three things you need to do when something goes wrong in any relationship. He says, one, the first thing you do is look at yourself, and ask yourself, how did you respond? Your body
Mhm.
language, your tone, facial expressions. The second thing, he said, do you even have to respond? Everything does not require a response. And the third
Mhm.
thing he says, are you smart enough to know that sometimes you need to walk away and come back and respond later? And I never forgot those three things. He said, you never respond to anything or anybody while you're in your emotions.
Mhm.
Those three things out the window now. People, I had people quit and then come back like the next day say, I didn't mean it. I'm sorry. Like, what? You just, seriously.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you can't accept it because I didn't mean it. I had somebody tape it on the door or on somebody's door to quit, And so, I mean, we get a lot of act out of emotions. We send emails that we shouldn't send,
Mhm.
because we angry, we upset. We write notes, we send text messages. You know how many times I sat down with couples and somebody said something that they didn't mean, and then I'll tell them like my grandma told me, you can apologize for everything. You can't take stuff back.
You can't take stuff back. But it also requires you to look at comprehension, right? So again, going back to communication, and I could say a thing, and because you comprehended a certain way, it could be something totally off from what I was trying to convey, right? And so again, I think it's being able to practice the pause to say, what did you mean by that? Right? Because if I pause long enough to ask you what you meant by that, then I'm slow to take offense, right? That's in the word. So we know that we should be slow to take offense. In my practice, I always tell people to eliminate the emotion and let's look at the facts. Going back to what your dad said, you know, did you necessarily have to respond? Did you respond out of anger? Did you respond in a malicious way, right? Like, oh, you did this, so now I need to do that. So just really helping people to understand that sometimes we have to be able to pause long enough to separate the two, so then we don't have to come back to with those apologies. We don't have to come back with the oh, I didn't mean it that way, versus um again, just being able to communicate effectively. You also said something about when people say, well, that's just how I am and I've always been that way. And that's cool that that's just how you are and you've always been that way. But at a certain point in life, what you're going to see is that other people don't have to put up with you just being that way, right? Kids get older, people come to their senses. And so it's like, you know what? You that is my dad and he is just that way, but I don't have to subject myself to it. Or that is my mom and oh, she's just in another tizzy, but I don't have to subject myself to it. And I think when we understand it, we have the power to step away from a thing. Then those people who operate in the mindset of that's just how I am and I've always been this way, that's going to end up being a lonely road, you know?
So I was just curious to ask, like, how would you break that down to people in my generation? Because I feel like a lot of them, especially when you say take a pause and listen to what the person is saying, they're not doing that. When they're taking that pause, they're just thinking of the next response they're going to say or the next example they're going to throw out there. So, like, how would you break that down to someone in my generation?
So for your generation and even younger, I'm real big on breath work, right? So I'm always telling people like pay attention to your body. And if you find yourself tensed up or you're holding your breath, you know it's time to exhale. And it only takes practice. Like it's not going to happen the first time. The first time you're probably going to cut somebody out. The first time you may or may not get into a fight, but you'll be able to think about it if you can reflect on it because we've already had the conversation. Then the next time you're in a situation, you're going to notice that sensation in your body. You're going to notice, oh my God, I'm sitting here holding my breath. You're going to take that deep breath, right? And again, it just takes practice. And so I always try to get young people to think about what do I have to lose, right? And you might say, I don't have nothing to lose right now. What is it that you're striving for, right? So like if you want to be the next senator or you want to be I don't know, a police officer or whatever, but you end up getting a felony charge or an offensive touching charge, right? What does that mean for your future? So I think having those raw conversations to get young people to think about what is it that I have to lose? If I do this today, is this something that will impact me for the rest of my life? And I think, and this is just going back to the work that your dad and I have done. When we think about like violence in neighborhoods and stuff like that, those are the conversations that we're having. You know, both families lose. Like if you go out and you shoot somebody because you're like feeling disrespected or violated and you want to get your revenge, yeah, that other person's family feels it, but your family is going to feel it too. I think tapping into visualization when it comes to you guys because everybody learns different. But can you imagine your mom sitting in a courtroom crying because her baby's not coming home? Can you imagine your mom at your funeral? Like I go there, and so because sometimes we feel so invincible and we don't think about that. I used to do an activity with high schoolers, Devin, where I would have them write out their obituary, right? And these were for kids that were getting into a lot of trouble. But let's write out your obituary. What do you want people to remember about you? Oh, Miss Ebony, you're crazy.
I still do that. Mm-hmm.
You still do it? Yeah, I mean, so I mean, I'm doing different things, but I think that it's important to be able to visualize a thing, because I think so many times people think it's so far removed. Another thing with the younger generation is the preconceived notion of I'm not 18 yet, so I could crash out, I could ball out, I could do whatever I want to do, and there are no real consequences. And so I get them to understand that these charges stick. These charges don't just fall off once you turn 18, because that's the mindset. And that's the misconception that young people tend to think. And so I think that in breaking it down, I just try to be as straightforward and raw as possible. Um, I oftentimes give kids the version of Miss Ebony the mom and Miss Ebony the therapist. I say that all the time, but it's a real thing. And I have a soft spot for the boys because I'm like, I'm a boy mom too. Yes, I have a daughter, but I think that the way that we send y'all out into the world is completely different. And so when I'm working with young men, my thought is every summer I need to see y'all again in the fall. You know what I mean? I need to know that y'all are going to be okay because it's a different type of um fear that we carry with regards to boys. And so many of our young men, they do, like your dad said, they feel like they're not good enough, whether it's that a teacher looks at them and says you'll never be anything, or somebody in their home is saying, boy, you're gonna be just like your daddy, you ain't nothing. And so I really try to affirm young boys. And I think some of that not feeling good enough is that they're not being affirmed. And so I could go on and on about how to break it down, but I think that when you guys are young, it's really about like just being y'all's biggest cheerleaders and helping y'all to understand that you matter. And that really, I know it's cliche, but the sky is the limit. Like y'all could go beyond the sky in this day and time. Like y'all have so many resources, but it's about tapping into it. I hope that answered your question because I know that was long.
How much of an impact do you think social media has for and social media, to those of you who listen or watch and don't think so, it impacts young people, not so young people, seasoned people. I've had a professional tell me, I never forget this. She was a paralegal, an older woman, and she came to a workshop I was doing for youth in Norristown about social media. She raised her hand, and I thought she was going to say something totally different. And she said, I'm
Yeah.
glad you said that because she said, I'm divorced. And she said, I had to get off social media because it made me suicidal. I said, what do you mean? She said, because I was listening to other divorced people and they made me think they were living these perfect lives and that I was inferior, that I wasn't enough, that I was doing something wrong. And it wasn't until I actually started meeting people that I had figured out that most of it wasn't true. And this was a professional. This lady was like in her late 30s.
Yeah, because and we all, I mean, I don't even want to take that for granted, but we get to take as many photos or do as many cuts or re-recordings as we want to come up with the perfect thing that we let loose to the world, right? And so in life, we don't always get that many takes. And so that's what I say to people. Like, you could be whoever you want to be on social media, but what happens when you're at home by yourself? Those are the things that you need to consider. Like, okay, that's all well and good because again, yeah, people only post the good stuff. Nobody's posting, oh man, I was up crying all night last night, or I don't know how I'm gonna pay this bill. Like nobody talks about those things like that. It's always God has blessed me, but nobody talks about being in the valley. And so I think just being open and having those conversations too, because social media has definitely created the spirit of comparison, you know. Um, People put filters on, right? Like you could put a filter on and have a six pack. You know what I mean? So but yeah, social media has done that. And I think it's just really getting back to um some of the more traditional ways of being, the more traditional ways of communicating and having conversations. Like kids nowadays, they don't even exchange numbers. They exchange TikToks or Snapchats and Instagram handles. And I'm like, what y'all don't have a phone number? You know, and everything is
That's not all bad.
emojis and the likes. Yeah.
All bad because you get to see somebody's character. They giving you something. We got some crazy stuff, but I do agree. So how much of that do you think plays on people's self-worth? Like,
I think all of it. Think about it. Since social media, and there are just certain things I'm not going to do, and it could be age, but since social media, think about it. People, there's always a holiday, and we're like, that's a thing, right? Like all of these created holidays now, all of these elaborate parties and gender reveals and prom send-offs, and you know, it's like if somebody does it, then the next person feels like they have to do it even bigger, you know. And so I like to tie it into like real life stuff. So it's like, okay, that's all well and good, but you can't do that. And then the next month you're asking people to help you pay your rent, your mortgage, your car note. You know, I mean, you can, but it's no one else's responsibility to help dig you out of the hole for something that you created for a like or a share, and then now you're struggling behind the scenes. So I think it's really just helping people to be true to themselves. And it's like, if I can't do that, it doesn't make me less than. Or even if I can do that, but I'm not willing to spend my money in doing that. Like I had a conversation with a young lady a while ago, and she says, Miss Ebony, you always going somewhere. So I said to her, I said, yeah, but you're always at the mall, or you will spend $500, $800 on a purse. I'm not doing that. You know, if I'm gonna spend $800 on a purse, I could take a trip. And so it's just that mindset and helping people to understand, like, again, we all have choices, you know, and so being able to again eliminate or remove yourself from the space or the mindset of comparison, being able to stand on who you know yourself to be. And I think that's some of what we have to get back to. My daughter said to me, this was a long time ago when she was little, she said, Mom, you know how celebrities go outside looking a mess? And I was like, yeah. She was like, and they can get away with it because of who they are. I was like, okay, I could see that. Like people be having some edgy stuff. She said, well, that's how you are. I said, are you saying I be outside looking a mess? She said, yeah, but you can get away with it because of who you are. And so I helped her in that moment. And I said, no, I'm pretty confident and comfortable in who I am. And so my style is my style. I don't feel like I have to go along with the trends. I don't feel like if someone says, girl, why would you put that on? I'm not going to second guess it. I put it on because this is what I like, you know? And so I think we have to help our babies with that. And then that's how they grow up to be adults that are comfortable and confident in who they are. And it, again, diminishes the thought or the feeling of not being enough.
And this takes me to our last segment. I do agree. I think, again, me and my statistics, I truly believe about 80% of the people in this country have no idea who they are. None whatsoever. And I know that's 8 out of 10. When I do workshops, one of the questions I will ask professional people, can you tell me who you are without using your name or your title? And you'd be surprised at how many people struggle. And then, like, I'll say, what's your name? You'll say Evan. So I say, well, no, it's Militia or something like that. And they're like, nah. I said, but you missed the point. It doesn't change who you are. You know, and I think we are so tied into identity being physical things, you know, or things that material things, that we lost sight of our true real identity. And I say that because I think if you don't know who you are, this is where this becomes manipulation. Because I know you don't know who you are. So we get, if you really loved me, you would. Or this is the expectation of what love really is. And, you know, as human beings, you said it earlier, we want to be affirmed. We want to be loved. We want to be nurtured. We act like we don't want to, but it means something. You know, a lot of people end up in bad relationships. And so I guess how much of that is that you see that you deal with. And if somebody came to you as a client, how would you walk them through their process? Because I know a lot of people are being manipulated, they don't even know it. They don't have a clue, you know.
Yeah, I think just helping them. I think if once they're vocalizing, because sometimes you need to hear yourself say it, right? It's one thing to get it from out of your head, like, okay, I'm experiencing these things, but once they, and I think it's a brave gesture for men to go to therapy, right? I say that all the time because as women, normally women are going to go see a therapist. Women are going to be the ones that go to the church, right, before the men, most times, but um when men take a step forward in that part of their journey, one, I think is super commendable because it takes a certain level of vulnerability to say, I need to expose these things, or hey, I just need an outlet, and so um I think that being able to have the conversation, again, for them to say it out loud, and then I can repeat back to them what I just heard, right? Because I think when they say it out loud, one is getting it off of them. For me to say it back to them, now they can really hear it, and then they are able over time to make sense of it. Well, yeah, I do remember when such and such happened and it made me feel this way. Well, why did it make you feel that way? Well, because it reminded me of something that my mom used to say to me when I was younger, or it took me back to a time when blah blah blah. But I think helping them to see that, on their healing journey, helps them to feel encouraged and deserving of a certain type of uh, relationship or interaction, right? So it's not saying, oh, you need to get out of that relationship, but how can you be grounded in the relationship that you're in without losing your voice? How can you exercise what it is that you need from your partner without feeling like you have to raise your voice or to act out a certain way, right? And so I think just really putting them in position to kind of look at that. I think that manipulation is taught, and it stems from being little. It starts really early in life. I think that also being able to, again, just call a thing, and understand that love doesn't have to be conditional, right? And so being able to kind of look at their situation like, what's going on here, right? But helping them to really be able to unpack it and to see it for what it is, and to not feel, again, to not feel less than. It's easy to say not to feel less than, but again, even that takes practice. It takes unlearning a thing. And so helping them to peel back the different layers and levels of what they have experienced over time, I think is what works best in trying to get people to understand who they are. And think about it, if you're not told who you are from a little person, then yeah, it is easy to become a man, a young woman, and have no idea who you are. And so I think that, again, it's loaded, Chris. Like, there's not one particular thing or one particular way to go about it. I think you have to kind of be in the room with the folks to assess the space that they're in order to even start diving in and unpacking it.
But I think perspective is always a great place to start. I think
Mhm.
there's so many times when we say stuff and we don't put it in proper perspective for people. We assume that everybody understands. Like, if I say healthy relationship, the assumption is that everybody thinks, well, healthy relationship is he choking me. You know what I mean? Because that's what my mama did.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Hmm.
funny because when I sit down to counsel couple, I'll ask, I'll give each a piece of paper and I'll say, what's your definition of love? You'd be surprised, almost 90% of the time we get two totally different definitions. That's a conversation people never have. They assume when they say I love you that they're saying the same thing, and often they're not.
Mm-mm.
And so I think that's part of the problem. And self-awareness is, and I'll say it, when it comes to African Americans, and I'll start with females, you become an angry black woman. When you just say enough is enough, and you don't have to be angry, but because or you become overly aggressive.
Yeah.
you know, she's having a bad day, you know.
Mhm.
But if you are of different persuasion, the titles change. You know, she's a go-getter. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? She's trying to survive in a man's world. Yeah, she's defending herself against all this bad stuff that happened today. I go over to men. It's times when I've been in the room, when I had somebody of a different color, actually start raising his voice at me. And I was the only dark person in the room. So after about 60 seconds, I was like, well, you're not going to talk to me like that. And everybody in the room goes, well, calm down, calm down, calm down. I'm like, wait a minute. All I said was, so that has a lot to do with it too.
It does.
And if you're a different person, you get beat down by that. That's a subtle way of putting you in your place. That's a subtle way of saying, well, Ebony, you can't come in here like that. Or Tristan Devin. So I think that's the other part of this thing, that when you don't know who you are, you're constantly being formed and shaped by your experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of us, or a lot of people in today's age, that's a big struggle. But the whole thing about love, that's a whole other show we got to talk about, because that word is used with clothes, is all kind of stuff, man. People get married, they don't know what the definition of love is. That is like, I've learned that dealing with young people and adults, that there needs to be a class taught.
I agree, and it's ironic that you that you brought that up, because we just had a conversation about that as well. And it's like, you don't get to tell a person how to express love, right? And so you're right. Some people say it with words, some people say it with actions. Neither way is wrong. But if their way is saying it with words, then that's their way. You don't get to say, well, you still need to show me, and you need to do this, and you need to do that, and vice versa. If I'm showing you that I love you, and maybe I just wasn't raised in an environment where I said it vocally, but my actions prove to you that I love you, right? So it doesn't mean that my way is wrong. And I think it all circles back to effective communication and having those conversations early on.
We got to get a show going, because this is what I got to push back at. No, because this is what I got to push back at. It's not about somebody's way being wrong, but when you're in a relationship, it's about meeting each other somewhere at a comfortable spot. You can't get, to me, if you're in a relationship and you say, I need these things, or I would like to have these things. And part of these things is, I need to hear you say. Because I deal with a lot of guys who are learning how to say it.
Yes.
They have never said it, and they just, what I mean is typical response they give. And now they're in this relationship, and they've been in it for years, and the lady's like, I've been telling you I love you for 13 years, and I keep, when you will say it back? Well, you know how I feel. And so I think there's a point, though, where you got to be willing to change a little bit in there to accommodate your partner. It's great to say I'm a touchy-feely person, but sometimes we want to hear. Sometimes, I got to hear. Look, man, I say this all the time. I'm at the stage in my life now where it's like, don't give me flowers when I die. Don't come to my funeral and tell this great stuff about me. No.
Right, tell me now.
Tell me you like me now. Tell me you appreciate me now. Tell me that I think that's the way we need to be. Don't wait till somebody gets sick, or hey, you know what? I really appreciate your friendship. I just think that needs to happen more. And I don't want to. I'm like the person you're talking about. I just don't want to hear it. I want to feel it too. I want both. Yeah. Now, I do understand it's not going to be all or nothing, and you can't expect somebody to turn around and do a 180.
I mean, it goes back to unlearning a thing, right? And so if we have this conversation and I say to you, well, I'm willing to try, that's a start, right? You being willing to try, we can start there. And so if I understand that you're willing to try, then I need to back off and not put so much pressure, because you told me that you're willing to try. I can't be looking at my watch like, you ain't tried yet, or you're trying don't look like how I want it to look. You know what I mean? And so
it's been 10 minutes. No, I'm gonna keep
yes.
No, but I think this talks about because I think there's so many layers to this, because there's so many layers to people. And like, I use the perfect example. We've been married 41 years. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were asking me questions, and I said, I likened it to understanding there's a difference between saying look at God and look to God. And they said, what do you mean? I said, because we all can say look at God when he does something good for us. Oh, look at God, he did this, he did this. But what about those times, man, when you have to look to God? And I said, well, I said, I liken it to my marriage. He says, well, what do you mean? That's a word. I said, no, it's not. I said, because when you get married and you really meet somebody, you say, look at God. Oh, you got to put the work in? When people start going, you got to look to God. Okay, God got into the process. And I think people are not taught that. We get stuck on the first part. We get stuck on all that glitters kind of thing. And I think that's happened in so many relationships with the work part is where people they don't understand it. And this is why I think social media ruins it, because you look at social media and you see all these reality TV shows and people put up with crap. They allow themselves to be treated like crap, and people think they think that's reality. They do.
So I think also to your point, it's so crazy. I was speaking with a teenager, and this little boy this young man liked her, and she says to him, "Well, I need a poster." So I'm like, why do you need a poster? She was like, because I need a poster with him asking if I could be his girlfriend or whatever. And I'm like, people don't have to do posters. What, just for the sake of posting it? You need a poster, but that's their mindset, and so it's having those conversations to help them understand that that's not the norm, and we don't have to make it the norm. And as a mom, I would tell my son, if a young lady is saying to you, the only way that I'll go out with you is if you make me a poster so that we can announce it, I would say she's not the one. She's not a good fit. Run. Yes. And so, but I think being able to have those conversations with the younger people to let them know, like, okay, yes, you are being raised in this era where everything is publicized, everything is out there, but some things are meant to be kept private,
We're gonna connect. We need to get a show. No, I'm serious, because that's a topic that I think there's a bunch of topics that people never address. People never talk about what a relationship looks like.
Yes.
People never talk about the work that goes into a relationship. And I know we run out of time. For instance, even on the church side, we think if you just go to church, you're gonna be okay. No. But we tell people that, if you just go to counseling, you're gonna be okay. No. But people think because of that. And on the other side of the coin is, for a lot of us, myself included, relationships is on the job training.
What are you going to apply?
There was no, my father loved my dad and God rest his soul, but we never had those conversations about how to be, and I was able to have, but even now with my sons, things are so different. Like, we had a whole show about dating, because I grew up, you dated.
Yes.
They see that same things like, no. Yeah, we were having this whole conversation because it started because I was amazed at the number of people who don't even know dude's last name when y'all moving in together. I'm like, what are you talking about? Or I love him, well, where you live? I don't know. I got his phone number. Like, how do you not? So that's how the conversation started. But even something as simple as what's your definition of love? The 50-50. There's so many things, man. So I'm gonna reach out to you tomorrow. We gotta get something going, man. Because it's okay.
I'm here for it.
Even dealing with these middle school kids, the number of kids I come across, with low self-esteem, that you meet the first couple of times, they can't even look you in the eye, and then by the time you get to session, it's a shame because you get like 3/4 of the way through, and then you can't shut them up. But because they got trauma, they have no self-esteem. And people not taking time in this day society to build those type of relationships anymore. If I meet Ebony and we not clicking the first 15 minutes, I'm out.
And that's okay.
I'm out. But for some people it's not, because some people see it as a form of rejection.
Yeah, we gotta help folks with that too.
It's the same thing when you get into to sex. And I'll say it, there's a lot of people who feel like no means I'm rejected. And they take it personally. They take it personal. So and a lot of it is because there's probably a lot of other things they take personal too. It's not really personal, but I think we live in that type of society that no to anything is considered rejection.
Yeah.
Even if it's kids, some kids, if you say no, you can mean not right now, but say no, they take it as rejection. That's what we are now. Yeah, we are now. But this is, as always, a great show. But I'm going to connect with you tomorrow. Definitely got to connect with you tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good.
We can work out a time on the schedule, man. But we are always so grateful to have you here. I don't know why I didn't think of you sooner when I came up with the topic, but so I do appreciate you. This is like last minute. I think it was this morning I texted you, right? Yeah.
Yes, this afternoon.
Well, 22 years of friendship, so I should be allowed those privileges.
Yeah. It's all good. Look, it worked out, and as always, like when you call, I'm there.
But I got to give you a flowers. I'm talking about it. Your journey has been remarkable from the time we met in Chester High School, from where you come from. I look at it's funny because I think about where you are now, and I think about those conversations that we were having, and how certain people thought we were crazy.
Mm-hmm.
In that office, and it's funny, like wow, look where we are now. And I think especially what you being able to do with your children is remarkable. I think it's remarkable. I'm waiting for the book, realistically. I'm like, gotta be booking it sooner. But
Listen, I have a couple up in this head of mine that I need to let loose.
Gotta get you out of there. Hey,
Yeah.
You got because I think it's remarkable. And I think in a day and age where we often criticize each other, black men and black women, I think we got to learn to celebrate each other too.
Absolutely.
And 22 years is a long time, man.
I know.
It's a long time, man. But I've enjoyed every minute that I have.
Same.
Looking forward to the next 22 years.
Come on. Yes.
Yeah. I'll definitely reach out to you tomorrow. All right?
Okay.
But here you go. Have another episode of Above Average Black Men in the Book.
Another great.
Yeah. We
Follow,
rising above.
subscribe,
Let me
share,
tell you,
comment.
as